preparing itself.
Now we are.
Okay.
So are we going to pause on introductions for now and just go to the business portion?
Yes.
That sounds good. Okay, so welcome to the Housing Committee. And I just want to go through the agenda, and there's some additions to it also. I'm Louisa Craddock. I'm the co-chair. Melissa Rosenberg is also the co-chair. And the rest are members of the Housing Committee and of Community Board 7. So the first thing was that at our last meeting, we talked about NYCHA, the letters that we were writing. In view of the fact of the election and that we do not exactly know who will be our representatives, we decided to put that off at the moment. My understanding is that Stephen has contacted NYCHA and has made arrangements for NYCHA representatives to meet with TAs, basically with the FedAid. And they will discuss specific issues that are pertaining to FedAid housing. But as to reaching out to the electeds, we're going to wait until we see who the electeds actually are. The second thing would be affordable housing options.
Can I just add to the NYCHA update before we move on? I think also doing this in the summer or like after the summer will give us more clarity on, I think, the content of the infrastructure bill, as it's very much still being fleshed out, the American Jobs Act or whatever it's been called now. And yeah, agree that like having on a task force, assuming we want to form one to work with NYCHA, will make more sense when we know who our elected officials are, but also when there's a new mayoral administration and we know who the new NYCHA chair is, and get a better sense of their priorities and how they want to handle the huge capital needs and hopefully capital infusion.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Yes. And Melissa and I were talking, and a lot of you might know about the Chelsea Task Force, which is a group of nonprofits, residents, electeds, etc., that have been working on, I believe, RAD and other issues about NYCHA, and I'm sorry?
Also infill, yeah.
And infill. And so what we're doing is working on getting someone from that group who can address us and tell us how they are working, and to see if we can get some ideas from them, because the task force has a lot of resident input, and that's something that we're looking for. So the next thing is affordable housing, different kinds of affordable housing other than NYCHA. And one of the things that Robert has been talking about to us is Mitchell-Lama. There is a bill up from Linda Rosenthal.
And Kavanaugh, Brian Kavanaugh.
And Brian Kavanaugh.
And both of which have Louisa passed. And I'm glad you mentioned it, because in that listing of the different categories of affordable housing, hopefully in September, that we're going to go over, we're going to try to propose a letter of support targeted to the governor, because to get him to sign the bill, see the importance. And we'll go over all of that in September. But indeed, as you say, it is Mitchell-Lama, and the bill's focus is to reinforce the option of remaining in the programs in face of the kind of oppositions that we've gotten from certain boards to privatize and certain. And so the provisions, very key provisions in the, we're not going to go down the list now, but the very key provisions in the legislation. It's called for short the omnibus bill for Mitchell-Lama. It is one of the voting, the threshold to approve privatization, which has gone up from to 80%, which is certainly much more difficult for any board to garner to take over the development and turn it over to a private developer. So that is certainly one of the important categories, one of the existing inventory when we're talking about preservation. Indeed, it is. So that yes, and the committee I think is supportive, and certainly Louisa and Melissa, you both have been, and we're doing the work with the Mitchell-Lama United Front, and I'm a part of that. I've been for years, and that's Adele Niederman. And these are the troopers of the bill, and who've had successes in rescuing co-ops. We're talking co-ops now, not rentals, out of the grips of these movements somehow that to privatize the Mitchell-Lama co-op. So indeed, that's not to go on, but it is a absolutely, utterly critical development, the success. And we have friends. Gail has been ferocious in her support, been very successful over the years. Of course, Linda Kavanaugh, and I certainly expect that the community board will be on board to sign on to this.
Well, what we have done.
Question. Sorry, just before we, so this is a state bill, is that right?
Yeah, Mitchell-Lama,
Yes.
that's a state legislation. Yes, indeed.
I guess my question is, session ended like yesterday or 2 days ago. So this bill was not passed, right? So
they were both passed, and the bill, yes, indeed, in the Assembly and in the Senate. The bill is on its way to the governor, but there's a lot of work in that you would know more than I do somehow. Well, rightfully, and so that over the summer there's a lot of work to be done in the Assembly, whether privately, individually, but to get the bill, to marshal your forces to I don't know if compel is too strong a word, because the governor may be on our side to begin with, but to make sure he signs the bill, and that gives it priority, because he will have 100 bills, if not more, on his desk to sign. And we want him to recognize that the Mitchell-Lama, the omnibus bill, is one of the first ones he should be signing.
Right. So Robert has contacted us to write a letter. We have tried to have MLU address us twice. They have not been able to, and which is unfortunate. We will have them later, but I have reached out to Linda Rosenthal and asked if she could address us at our next meeting, because Mitchell-Lamas, whether we're talking about the bill or not, Mitchell-Lamas are a large component of Community Board 7. And for myself, I'd like to know where they went right and where they went wrong. There were a lot of issues about this. So I'm waiting to hear from her. I sent an email to Erica. We'll see what happens. And I hope that we also finally get MLU to present to us also about this.
Well, indeed, Louisa, let's point of clarification. It isn't that they have, there's no reluctance or recalcitrance on their part. The first request, because we had scheduled them, I think it was for April, I brought them on, Richard Heitler from UHAB, which is the partner group, and they focus on Mitchell-Lama and HDFCs. But we were waiting for the bill to come out of Assembly on its way too. So there were developments at the state that we wanted to get some feedback from. So we paused, and then other things and so on. And then
I understand that, but I'd like to discuss, the overall issue of it.
No, Linda is wonderful for this, yeah.
I'm looking forward to hearing from them and from Linda.
Yeah, just before we move off the bill into the general issue, if we need to talk about that more, do you know, was Division of Homes and Community Renewal supportive of the bill? Like, did they have objections? Because if they didn't, I have no reason to believe the governor would not eagerly sign it. He's, in a politically vulnerable position. This is not.
I do not know, but I do not know the answer to that, but I'm going to text Adele right now to see.
Yeah, that'd be great to know. Because not that I'm not happy to write a letter, just it's effort. And if it's something the governor's already going to be very inclined to sign because the agency overseeing it is in favor, then it's like, maybe we don't need to.
Well, it's a good point. So let me ask her right now.
Okay, thank you.
I'll send you a chat, and then you can make the announcement, okay, of whatever the answer is.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay. And something came up today, and Jeanette, do you want to talk about tax reform? Sorry.
Well, I don't know that much about it. I just saw in actually when Councilmember Rosenthal sent around her notice, but I guess for the past 2 years, de Blasio had put together an advisory commission on property tax, and they're having a hearing on it on June 16th. And it looks like it has some, some radical changes on how you treat co-ops, condos, and rental buildings with over 10 units. And I know in the past, the Housing Committee has had a number of discussions or heard from community members who, and I think I'm on this bandwagon, you buy a co-op and 20 years later, the maintenance, the building is now assessed so high and the maintenance is so high that even though you're a homeowner, you're paying way more than 30% of your income on housing. And so tax, the huge jump in taxes over the past decade has really added to that. So I don't know enough about it to be able to present the whole thing. But I brought it to Louise and Melissa's attention, saying maybe this is something the Housing Committee wants to take a closer look at.
Yeah, so just to clarify one thing, they had the commission made a report that included recommendations. So obviously none of these are like necessarily being imposed. And I guess this is our chance to opine on those recommendations. Obviously we're not gonna be able to do that by Wednesday just because we're kind of a little behind the 8 ball on this, but yeah, wanted to open up to the committee and see if this is something you guys would want to discuss and explore. Jeanette, do you know is there like a time frame to submit written comments as opposed to the hearing?
Well, I don't know how to put it on. I don't know, Mark, you're always so good at putting these things on chat. It was in Helen Rosenthal's last distribution thing, but there is a link for the virtual hearing tomorrow or wait, today's the 16th, Wednesday. We have our land use committee meeting that night, but there is a link for for Manhattan residents regarding a hearing on it. So I think if some folks can attend that, for the Housing Committee, that would be good. I can't because it's during the land use committee.
Here, I'll share the Zoom info in the chat.
Great. Because
sorry, go on.
No, we can send this around. And the Upper West Side has a very large number of co-ops and condos. And it'd be interesting to find out, I think we can do it fairly easily, what proportion of the housing stock of the district, do you know?
No, I just put the Bronx one in the chat by accident, so sorry, don't use that one.
And what Jeanette said is very true. We have a lot of people who are kind of land poor. And that is a problem with people moving in. It changes the whole demographics of the neighborhood in that we are inundated with co-ops and condos that are now very, very pricey and only can be afforded by people who have a certain high income level.
Right. I just also want to flag that, I think this is also a very divisive, difficult issue because I'm a renter and I think renters are disproportionately burdened by taxes. So it is going to be a difficult discussion, and I don't know if we'll be able to come to consensus on what our recommendations should be, but that obviously does not mean we shouldn't discuss it.
And I just wanted to add that, what we want is a diverse neighborhood, and what, Mitchell Lama, what co-ops, people who bought years ago and, when prices were affordable and now they could never afford their own apartment. This is the middle class or the lower middle class or what allows the Upper West Side to be more diverse. And so why, yes, we absolutely want to, prioritize the people who are the poorest of the poor, I think it's important that we also take into consideration the broader issues. But yes, I recognize that in speaking on privilege because I own a co-op, but it's one of these sort of handcuff situations. I can't afford it, but I can't sell it because I couldn't afford to live anywhere else to some degree.
So we could submit written testimony. I was just on the website and you can do that. I don't know when the window for that closes, so we could try to talk about it in July, because obviously we all need to read the report. Do you all want to plan to do that? To do some homework, read the report, come with your thoughts, and then decide if we can come to some kind of letter to submit in a written version, in written form?
Yes, there are quite a number of issues that are raised on this, but we don't have to address all of them. But I think what Jeanette said about paying more than 30% of your income actually is true for many co-op owners and is disproportionate to what you are supposed to be able to do and able to afford. Let's try it. If people could read the preliminary report, did you send this out now?
Mark, did you put it in the chat? I thought
the link is in the chat, and
Thank you.
Scanning the preliminary report, it doesn't seem to tell you when the window closes. It is a preliminary report, so, and they anticipate further hearings.
Okay.
Yeah, I would suggest that, if people can, they watch or they attend the public hearing, and then maybe we discuss it in the fall or something.
Okay. Yeah, but I definitely agree with you. I think it's something interesting for us to explore, and it is, a notoriously unfair system. So
yeah, I think you
For everybody.
have to put it into perspective. This is a report for the whole city, and we have to be careful about reading this report purely through the lens of the Upper West Side, and you have to look at it in terms of the whole city. And it addresses a lot of issues in other parts of the city where they feel that the tax system is far more unfair than we do. So I just put that out there as somebody who spends a lot of time in a lot of other parts of the city.
yeah, that's a helpful flag. I mean, I do think.
I mean, this is a discussion that's been going on anywhere from 10 to 12 years. And this report itself has been sitting there for 2 years, or close to 2 years.
Yeah, I think
So it's really, it's different than the issue of the co-op tax that was just through the legislature. It's a horrendously complex one, and I don't know if it's going to come to fruition because so many people have been talking about this for so many years. And I mean, you get to the point where, not to make fun of the outgoing mayor, but he has millions and millions and millions of dollars in 2 one-family houses in Brooklyn. And I think everybody has heard how much taxes he pays.
Right. But also just to ground us in the moment, like, this is an outgoing mayor. There's 6 months to get something done. I don't think anything's going to be done. I've heard that like Vicky Bean had no interest even touching this issue, but I guess she's been forced to now. But I think the idea is they're going to kind of keep the public process going and run out the clock. And then the next mayor will come in and decide if they want to have anything to do with this, which they might not, because it's politically very sticky. It's a very sticky issue.
Very, very complicated. And it's a lot bigger issue than just the Upper West Side.
It does seem to me that they're taking on a lot of different issues and that it might be better if they break it down. But that doesn't stop us from addressing issues that pertain directly to us.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ira. This, if I had a single family home out in Brooklyn, I would have a different view on this. But I think as being a representative of Community Board 7, it's our job to talk about how a law that's proposed for all of the city will affect our community board. And I do agree, there's probably a good chance that this doesn't end up getting passed, but this is a window for us to look at the work that's been done and to voice our opinion on something that's periodically come up. It's extremely complicated. I think, though, one of the things I do like in the recommendations is it's trying to institute comprehensive reviews of the property tax system every 10 years. And I think similar to the zoning code, which is, so 3 volumes, it's like people just keep adding to it and nobody wants to touch it because it's such a big problem.
Yeah, well, that's,
So it doesn't help us to keep sort of taking that.
yeah, well, I mean,
I
we
agree.
have-
Just sorry to address, Jeanette, I in no way meant like it wasn't worth us looking at because it might not happen. I guess I was trying to say for timeline, perhaps there is less of a crunch because it might be just like a longer timeline for anything to
I
happen.
mean, the other problem that we have right now, because the pandemic and whether it shifts, and I'm getting into the weeds here, but our overall assessments in terms of a lot of the commercial properties are getting really thrown about, and I'm sure Doug can comment on this, but it may impact our municipal finances in a way that we don't want, and we may well end up finding out that there's an impetus to actually shift tax burden to people who have no choice as to where they go, i.e. class 2 properties. It's another scary thought.
Right.
Okay, so our next steps here would be to review the report. Louisa, you and I should just discuss if this should be like the July agenda or a September agenda.
Right.
And we can try to formulate something.
Okay, and I wanted to bring up something that's at the other end. The eviction moratorium is going to be ending soon. And I think we should discuss it. I don't know of any plans of how they are going to handle it afterwards. People have just built up this huge debt, and I don't know what's going to happen. And it's something that I think that we should explore.
Yeah, what would your proposal be for like a?
I don't know. I don't know that we can actually do anything, but we can see if there are any bills out there and what some people might be planning to do, was maybe some electeds. I don't know. Nothing that I've read has offered a clear path. And so I just wanted to bring this up and for discussion. And if anybody knows anything or anyone would like to share this further.
I think that it's an important discussion, but I wonder if it should be done in conjunction with commercial evictions and whether
No,
we should
I
do this in conjunction
want to say no.
with BCI. Okay, so no, so why?
I would like to keep it separate. I think they're very just different issues and they are both important, but like I would prefer, but I mean, Louisa, you can disagree with me. I prefer to not do that.
Okay.
But, sorry, back to the actual subject. I think we had a presentation or a speaker like a few months back or longer months back, and they were kind of in that cancel rent camp. So like, that's obviously one perspective people are taking. And I don't know that that's one that our board should or would necessarily take. But everyone's solution so far has always been the federal government will provide rent relief. And then I think there was a lot of rent relief funding provided in the last COVID stimulus bill, but the issue is that it's not being administered well and like no one's really been able to access it. That's my understanding, but if anyone else, so I don't know, maybe.
Let me just share a vignette because, you know, I'm a realtor and I do manage a couple of properties, private homeowners in the Bronx who live in the property, but they also have rooms. And in many cases, the rooms are rented to people on public assistance and the city pays, say 80%. And then you, out of your pocket, you pay $100, $50. Well, when this whole thing began happening, they would refuse to pay their $50. And these are people who didn't lose their little part-time jobs or whatever, because the governor says you don't have to pay rent. And, so the hardship to the small homeowner is not just a question of tax, it's a question of the occupant that relies on the public trough that won't refuse because they're being told. They don't look at it as if you're in a situation of hardship that we understand and we're going to work with the landlord to give you relief. They feel it's an instruction not to participate, not to add their portion, which is a minimal portion. So, that rent forgiveness altogether is really a real quicksand. It's really unfair. It's just wrong. It's just wrong.
Mark, do you want to say something, and then Roberta, and then Rich?
I think Roberta was first.
Oh, I mean, maybe because you're the host, you came to the top, but okay. Yeah, Roberta, go ahead.
I actually had my hand up earlier on a different issue, but the new census data is out, and I think we should take a hard look at it. I think Furman has just looked at it, so I think we should take a hard look at that and see maybe for the September meeting if we can, kind of look at where we are with numbers, and what I wanted to say is I live in one of the Lincoln Tower buildings, and many of the people in the Lincoln Tower buildings have been adversely affected by the tax increases. And we do certiorari work, and it turned out my building had the highest tax rate, and we finally got it down, but it was really impacting many of the people who moved here and bought their apartments when the building converted, who could no longer afford to live here. But as Jeanette said, can't afford to live anywhere else.
Sorry about missing your hand before. I apologize. Mark.
Thanks. With respect to your tax discussion, this is a zero-sum game. So there will be winners and losers in this. So it's important to take the approach I think that you're taking. With respect to the eviction moratorium, though, one thing I wanted to flag, something that wasn't obvious to me until I ran across somebody who was in this situation. A lot of the evictions, of course, will be for non-payment. Residential tenants who haven't been able to pay their rent for however long, either because of COVID or somehow related to it. But there are also folks in our community, especially older folks, who have decamped from the city because of concerns about respiratory illnesses. And of course, this may at this point be a violation or appear to be a violation of the primary residence requirement for rent stabilization and rent control. I know two people who are in that situation and who have been surviving in North Dakota, but any New Yorker who is in North Dakota is just surviving there. They're not there for the long term. And it's really unclear whether a court will give them a pass on not being here for a year. So anyway, I just thought it might be interesting to keep an ear to the ground as we're talking about rent regulation and talking about the eviction moratoriums. That's uncharted waters for us right now.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Ethel, have you had your hand up for a while physically?
Yes.
Sorry, I can't see everyone, so please use it.
It's okay. Don't worry. I'm not to worry. I just might suggest, I know all of you have been working at this intensely, more than I have together in the committee, but may I suggest a way to approach the tasks of the several different things that everybody has mentioned? First, there is the obvious. It's going to be the summer. Everything that everybody said is really going to be action and movements and regular committees and so on in the fall. However, what can be some of the work during the summer, or at least through July? Of the several very important concerns that everybody mentioned, I would only suggest that the group consider working on 3 or 4 of the issues. You can't do all of them For example, the question of the anti-eviction, Louise is saying, what's going on with it? You know, it's a very important thing. Is it going to end? I could just tell you that I'm part of a planning group, and they have been collecting the literature because they're planning to come out perhaps with on anti-eviction, on advocacy. The community board can't itself start it, but I could provide some of the references. Let's say if you in the community board or we in the community board want to, within appropriateness of the board, we're not all scholars and so on, but we want to be able to concentrate on that. Or I think Roberta said about the census, or somebody did. And for example, the NYU has just come out with its annual survey, which does tap the census on changes in housing and so on. It's a very fine reference work, and we could be looking at Community Board 7 in it because they break it out, you know, and what have been the trends and in comparison to the city. I mean, and you know, appropriately, we can highlight, okay, here's what we see. These are concerns for Board 7. This is something with that needs addressing. What can we recommend? So I'm just saying that there's a lot to do. I think appropriately for the board, we could use some of the references and work of others who are doing it full time. And what we should do here is select 4, I'm going to say 4, it could be 3, it could be 5, of major issues that we want to know more about, that we need to know, that we know in September or later, that we are at the beginning of trying to deal with the great challenge of New York and of Community Board 7. And can we pick about certain topics that are most relevant and then focus on it appropriately?
So you're basically advocating for us to tap into others' expertise on these issues we've identified. And
yes, but if I may, to do that as we can, but everybody has mentioned, I mean, everything is very important, but I'm only suggesting 3 or 4, you know, we know that are a concern or that is doable or important and so on. Concentrate on that and then work on tapping some of the references and works and then putting it together appropriately at our level.
yeah, I mean, that sounds right to me. And the natural 3, just based on our discussion, would be obviously the ongoing NYCHA discussion we're having, property tax reform and the eviction moratorium. And Robert, on Mitchell-Lama, it sounds like that could actually be resolved pretty soon if the governor signs it.
Yes, I think so. I don't know. I think so.
I'm waiting for an answer from Adele on your question, Melissa.
Okay.
Right. I would like to add hotel conversions. I have contacted Vianda Simmons again and just gotten she blew me off.
Yeah.
She blew me off. And which is really annoying. However, the idea of hotel conversions as affordable housing, especially for the homeless, its time has come. So I think it's something that we should explore, especially because there are quite a number of old derelict buildings and or hotels on the Upper West Side, and I would be willing to take that on. On the point of the census data, that was going to come in on the DNS, that we would be analyzing the census data for the DNS.
So on the hotel housing thing, I think GNRS's bill just passed and is waiting to be signed, but that was supposed to sort of like ease the regulatory hurdles to those conversions and create like a whole new program in DHCR. So beyond HPD, it actually might be more fruitful to reach out to GNRS's staff and see if they'd be willing to engage, because I think HCR doesn't really know what they're going to do yet. So And I don't, as far as I know, HPD is sort of just in the preliminary phases of thinking that through what a program like this could look like.
Yeah, I agree.
That's just, but I do think that's an interesting topic. Peter, I saw your comment about SROs. I agree. I think they're kind of in some ways the same conversation.
Okay.
Ann Cunningham is still around and she can be a great point person on this.
Oops, sorry.
Ann Cunningham, she worked for Gail and she is a big advocate for SROs. So she's someone to reach out to. If she doesn't know, she'll know who knows.
Sorry, say the name one more time. I'm just writing it down.
Ann Cunningham.
Thank you.
And you can get her information through Gail.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so let's say those are the 4 issues. Eviction. Although with the eviction moratorium, I feel like the timeline is not great, right? Because Doug wrote in the chat, it ends end of August. And like, so we could try to focus on it on our next meeting and try to have like, get those resources that Ethel referenced before then, or have a speaker then who can help us write a resolution, but just a tighter timeline. Any thoughts on how we should handle that topic?
I've just lost sound.
For the eviction moratorium, I mean, I'm new to the committee. I'm curious what impact we can have and what is being done and what needs to be done, and also how much we know of how much it's going to hit our community. But it feels like it has the potential of being just a terrible issue. And there are 2 sides to it, of course. I'm rarely sympathetic to landlords, but here there's obviously we don't want to have people evicted, but there are a lot of, and I just put in chat a great article from Schenectady giving 2 sides to both all these small landlords who have some properties as their like sole source of income, and so they're tenants who've lost their jobs. And it's an interesting situation where you've got the government mandating that private people can't enforce laws and have to give their property to someone else. And I just wonder, like, how many people are there on the Upper West Side who might get evicted at the end of this, and how much of just a horrible impact will that have on renters in our district? And also just what might be done by government to ease the process.
Well, maybe we should contact Jerry Nadler's office. He could tell us what is in the upcoming infrastructure bill that might be pertinent to this. And they might have even some statistics.
Yeah, or our other elected.
And Helen's doing a lot of work on housing, as is Scott at Riverside. So I think you need to reach out to.
Okay, I could call Cindy.
Call Cindy and call Larry Wood.
Good idea.
So should we try to address that in July? Otherwise it'll be
Yeah, because of the imminency of it.
Definitely July.
That's a good idea.
Okay, so Louisa, can you take charge on like reaching out to those people and
Okay. And the other thing was the DNS, and basically it was to update our statistics, which would be very helpful for us anyway, to know the situation of both demographics and how many people rent, how many people own, etc. Furman is amazing on it, and we can go directly to the Census Bureau and do that. And I was wondering if anyone wanted to volunteer for this. For those people who like figures, it's a lot of fun.
maybe?
If someone, I'm working on it, so if anybody wants to help with me, it's fine.
Roberta, good.
Walk you through
I'll do
Well,
with you. I like this stuff.
I'd love to have someone from the housing committee with me on some of the housing stuff, just so we can dig in together.
Sounds
Okay.
like Teresa, it's your lady.
Okay, and so so basically it's updating the DNS that we've done. We're not asking for money. We will just be pointing out what the housing situation is on the Upper West Side, and the statistics will determine the policies that we may be asking to be changed.
And if you learn more about the evictions, you may be asking for relief there, because
Right.
that's something that we haven't faced before, and it's due to the pandemic.
Dealt with it.
And I don't know that you have any budget items, but there might be after the, if you have these people come to the July meeting, you may have some budget items to vote on at the July meeting.
Yeah,
If I could jump in on that, I recall a previous meeting, whether it was last month or the month before, that your committee was focusing on NYCHA as the budget asks, not necessarily as being the full panoply of needs that should be reflected in the DNS. But that I think that's what you guys all had.
Well, that's what we always, that's what the committee always asks, but because of the eviction moratorium ending, there might be something else that needs to be.
My understanding was because Stephen, you're right, for AmSam houses and for Douglas.
yeah, but I guess
Because the Fed Aid is dealing directly now with NYCHA, but that still leaves Douglas and AmSam houses.
Yeah, something I was pondering today though is like, if this infrastructure package does pass and that's like a huge infusion of money, like, do we still need to prioritize like nature funding? Because in the city budget, realistically, it's not really going to change, but I do understand that symbolically it is important that we identify it as a priority. So
If we don't ask, we won't get.
No, I think Melissa's right. We know we're not getting it from the city. We put it as one of our priorities because it is one of the top priorities of the community board. And so even though we know that we're asking for something that we're not getting, we put it there so that anyone looking at the DNS and looking at our budget priorities knows what our priorities are. So certain things you do just because
Okay.
I don't think we have to worry about there being too much money given to NYCHA.
Right.
okay,
Agreed.
I just wanted to talk that out.
Hi, this is Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
I also just wanted to share that because NYCHA has been systematically defunded, to an extent there's been divestment, constantly putting it on, making it a flag for a district needs statement is also important. There are still, NYCHA campuses that just need basic repairs with elevators and paint and just, their community rooms. And so to that end, I think it's imperative that they are a part of the district needs statement. Thank you.
So is Polly?
Absolutely. We were able to get a vaccination site at Frederick Douglass with great difficulty because initially the senior center at Fred Douglass flooded and they had to cancel the vaccination site. And then after a cleanup, we were able to get it back up there.
Yeah, I'm wondering the report the federal aid put together. It's like maybe there's some items from there we can pull, like big ticket items to include.
Well, I think that those items have been in our district needs statement they've been in the district needs statement itself, all of those items.
We should check with Stephen and how those meetings are going first. But I agree, they're not going to be fixing them right away, so we might just put them in there.
Whatever we put in, we should continue putting in. It is elevators and fixing things.
Right.
And mold and
Always elevators.
Okay.
Okay, does anybody have anything else they would like to bring up for discussion or just to discuss right now? Wow.
I don't want to jinx us and say this is the most efficiently run quick meeting ever.
Can I just throw one quick thought in to follow up on the DNS, and that is, I think that your committee would be best served by very specific asks with respect to the budget priorities, as opposed to sort of a more general statement that NYCHA is a priority and needs to be rescued.
Right.
You know, I don't want to say doorknobs, but I really think that OMB is not going to take us very seriously if we just say fix NYCHA. That's.
I agree, and that's why I was thinking-
No, we're going to talk about doors and elevators and all the usual.
Right, we always have specific asks. Our budget requests and our DNS are always very specific.
Yeah, and I thought that the Federal report had those specifically. I was just looking at part of it, and it did list things like they need a new lobby in Wise Rehab, and like that's the kind of thing that we could include. Yeah.
Once we get that specific though, does that go down a rabbit hole of with so many priorities? Are we prioritizing a lobby in one building versus an elevator in another versus security in a third?
Is there a way to like group it all together and like use up one budget item and say like funding for NYCHA repairs in CB7 : like including building like lobby repairs in this building? Like, Mark, does that work with the format?
No, of course we can do that. Of course we can do that. But you know,
but they kind of pushed back last year and the years before. So
when we group stuff,
but they push back anyway, so it doesn't matter.
I mean, they don't do anything anyway.
that part I agree.
I think we should ask for the big budget items, and then let this group that's working with NYCHA work on the smaller items.
I agree with that.
And this year we will be fact checking everything, so it's going to be a whole new process this year with the budget.
Awesome.
Okay. I see that Peter has the HDFCs in the chat, which is something else that we should look at. But
I mean, I agree with Ethel. I feel like we're saying like this we should look at and that we should look at, and like we're not able to focus ourselves. So like I'm not saying it's not important, but maybe just down the line.
no, I was going to say that they have been around for a while and they will be. So they not at the top of our list, but they are something that I think we should consider at some point.
Yeah, I agree.
But they will come to the community board when they have an ask for us.
Yeah.
They know how to reach us.
Sorry, Peter, you have your hand up. Did you want to add to that? I'll see. You can unmute if you've.
Yes, they were I guess I'm not so much to do a study of them, but just to be aware of them. And I have seen them in our neighborhood as being a large force and for the good, but they do have a number of issues, and they were created as low and moderate income housing. And I hate to lose them, and that there is a tendency for that to be happening. So I just think being aware of them as the committee, where they exist and how they're being handled would be valuable at some point. I mean, you've got a lot of stuff on your plate, so I'll mute myself.
Okay. So does anyone have anything else they would like to bring up? Wow. Okay. In that case, at 7:19, this meeting is concluded.
Oh, wow.
Amazing.
All right. Thanks so much.
Monday, everybody, right?
Great meeting.
All right.
All right. Good night,
Okay.
everyone.
Good night, everybody. Thank you. Welcome, Kristen.
Thanks, Louisa. This was great. And now you set the bar. I expect the meetings to be 45 minutes long.
Just like the CEC.
Of course, of course.
Exactly. Never again.
We're better than the CEC, even at our worst.
My first full board meeting went till after 11 on the.
Oh God, what was that?
Just with all of you, June 1st.
Oh, God, yes.
Just
See, I
saying.
wiped it out of my mind. It was so painful.
Did that make you regret?
Right.
It made me realize, oh, it's not going to be any quicker than the CEC.
It is quicker.
The joke, Kristen, is that when somebody gets elected chair, about 4 months after they get elected chair, they call for a recount. So
Ironic.
Good night, everybody.
Also remember, there are 50 of us.
Exactly. It's a big board.
Can you imagine the CEC if there were 50 people?
We'd never have gotten anything done, to be frank.
Never. And again, welcome, Michelle.
yay.
Thank you, everyone, for having me. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all very much. This
Okay.
was great.
Good night.
Sure.
Good